For almost 100 years, the Persian Empire and the Greek city-states were locked in this epic rivalry. But you have to wonder, behind all the massive invasions and famous battles, did the Persians actually have a consistent grand strategy? Or was the world's biggest superpower just winging it? Well, we're going to figure that out.
All right, let's frame the question. We're looking at a huge 88-year span of history, full of war, backroom deals, and frankly, a lot of betrayal. And through it all, we want to know, was Persian policy towards the Greeks consistent? Or was it just driven by ruthless, on-the-fly opportunism?
So first, let's set the stage, because the contrast here is everything. On one side, you've got the Persian Empire, a single, vast, unified superpower, all ruled by one guy, an absolute monarch. And on the other side, you've got the Greeks, this chaotic, messy collection of small, fiercely independent city-states that were just as likely to be at war with each other as they were with anyone else. This dynamic is the key to understanding everything that happens next.
Okay, so let's jump into Phase 1, the policy of conquest. This is the era everybody knows from the movies, right? It's all about raw military power and, more than anything, a burning desire for some good old-fashioned revenge.
And, this wasn't just about strategy. For the Persians, it was personal. The historian Herodotus tells this incredible story that after Athens helped out some Greek rebels, the Persian king Darius was so furious, he had a servant repeat the phrase, "Master, remember the Athenians," to him at every single meal. I mean, talk about a grudge. The goal was simple: punish them and subjugate them.
And this grudge, this vendetta, led to a series of absolutely massive invasions. You had Mardonius's fleet getting wrecked by a storm, the famous defeat at Marathon, and then the whole shebang with Xerxes, Thermopylae, and Salamis. The strategy through all of this was totally consistent. Just overwhelm the Greeks with sheer numbers. For over a decade, this was the Persian playbook. Period.
But then, after those stunning, just shocking defeats in 480 and 479 BC, that whole brute force policy was completely shattered. Persia was forced to make a major strategic pivot. And this brings us to Phase 2, a shift away from invasion and towards a new policy of containment.
Now, right at the heart of this new phase is this fascinating historical puzzle, something called the Peace of Callias. The big question is, did Persia and Athens actually sign a formal peace treaty? Or is the whole thing basically a historical fake? Answering this is crucial to understanding the new Persian policy.
If you look at the ancient sources, they are completely divided. You've got historians like Diodorus and Plutarch who write about this peace treaty like it was a done deal, no question. But then you have the grammarian Harpocration, who cites a much earlier source, and he's about to drop a historical bombshell that calls the whole thing into question.
I absolutely love this detail. It feels like a clue from an ancient detective story. So, the historian Theophamus claimed the treaty had to be a fake because the copy he saw was written in the Ionian alphabet. But here's the thing. At that time, Athens used its own local Attic alphabet for all official documents. They wouldn't switch over to the Ionian one for decades. It's such a tiny detail, but it casts huge doubt on whether this treaty ever really happened.
So here's the bottom line. Whether there was a real treaty or not, the result was the same. The huge direct invasion stopped. Persian policy had to change. What emerged was a de facto peace, a long, tense stalemate. The new policy was to keep the Greeks contained, but not to try to conquer them outright anymore.
But that stalemate? Well, it was about to be broken in the most dramatic way you can imagine. This is where the story takes a wild turn, leading us to Phase 3, a stunning, total reversal of Persian policy, all because of the long, brutal Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta.
You see, as the great historian Thucydides tells it, Athens got greedy. They launched this massive invasion of Sicily, and it was an absolute catastrophe. It left the Athenian Empire weakened, bleeding, and vulnerable. And Persia, who'd been patiently waiting on the sidelines for decades, saw its golden opportunity, not to invade, but to interfere.
And that opportunity led directly to the Treaty of Miletus in 412 BC. Now, this was no peace treaty. This was a war pact. Persia, the great enemy of all Greeks, officially teamed up with Sparta for the specific goal of destroying Athens. I mean, this was a complete 180-degree turn from everything they'd done before.
And just look at the terms, which Thucydides recorded for us. Persia provides the money, the gold and silver, for the Spartan war effort, and in return, Sparta agrees to hand the Greek cities in Ionia, the very same cities whose quest for freedom started this entire conflict decades earlier. Back over to Persian rule. It's just a shocking betrayal of that whole idea of Greeks sticking together.
This new divide-and-conquer policy really came down to the partnership between two key men. On the Spartan side, you have the brilliant but totally cash-strapped admiral, Lysander. And on the Persian side, you have the ambitious and incredibly wealthy prince, Cyrus the Younger. The historian Xenophon details their relationship, and it was just a perfect alignment of needs. One guy needed a patron with deep pockets, and the other needed a proxy to fight his battles for him.
And the scale of this new policy was just immense. Xenophon tells us that Cyrus showed up with an initial payment of 500 talents of silver. Now, to put that in perspective, that was a war-changing amount of money. It let Lysander pay his sailors more than the Athenians could, guaranteeing him the best crews. Sparta's navy was now essentially a mercenary force on the Persian payroll.
So we've seen three totally distinct phases: direct conquest, defensive containment, and then funding a proxy war. Let's pull all these threads together and reach our final verdict.
When you lay it all out like this, the evolution is crystal clear. The policy shifted dramatically depending on the circumstances. They started with direct invasion. When that failed, they pulled back into a long stalemate of containment, maybe marked by a questionable peace. And finally, they switched to intervening with money instead of soldiers, funding one Greek state to destroy another.
So, our verdict is in. Persian policy was anything but consistent. It was ruthlessly pragmatic and brilliantly adaptive. Now, the ultimate goal, to weaken and dominate the Greek world, that probably never changed. But the methods they used to achieve that goal were entirely opportunistic, shifting from invasion to stalemate to a divide-and-conquer strategy, all paid for with Persian gold.
And that brings us to one last pretty provocative question. Think about it. By the end, Athens was defeated. Those Ionian cities were handed back to Persian control, and the entire Greek world was left exhausted and divided. So, by playing the long game and trading soldiers for silver, did Persia actually end up winning the war it had started 88 years earlier?